So, almost 9 years ago, when I was traveling for my first book, The Buddha Walks into a Bar, I was in Boston and I was giving a talk. I was talking a little bit about compassion and relationships and expectations, and this woman raised her hand. She goes, what's interesting about all this is that I actually, after years of dating, wrote down everything I think I need in a spouse. And they should, because she got really specific. She said they should be this tall. They should like camping. They should like big dogs, not just dogs, big dogs specifically. They should work in this sort of industry. They should make this sort of money. They should be this age. And she had a very long list. And she did what many people do, which is she went on online and went on these apps and would sort of pick people based on these parameters. And she would then meet people and she would go out on dates. And she, in her own words, was horribly bored by all of these human beings. She got very frustrated. And she took this list, which is a list of set expectations of who she should be with. She folded it up, she put it in a dresser, and then she met someone who, in her words, flew in the face of everything that was on that list. The wrong height, the wrong age, the wrong profession, all of these things. And she fell madly in love with him. When we talk about genuine love, we are often, in the Buddhist tradition, talking about love that does not include strong expectations and attachment. And I often think of this story because that's exactly what this person found. That when she was able to let go of the ideas of what I need to be happy, she found happiness. How often have we had that happen? Not just in romantic relationships, but any area. Well, I never thought I'd be in this industry for work. I actually really enjoy it. Once I let go of my ideas of that I should be doing X, Y, and Z, or that idea of I should be going to that school, or whatever it might be, when we let go of our attachment, we might find true contentment and happiness in what's right in front of us, what's right under our nose, which of course is very much in line with the theme of genuine being in all the videos that we've been doing so far, of course. But now I want to get really specific because we have a set of teachings in Buddhism that actually show us what love can be. If we're able to start to empty ourselves out of all of the ideas that we think we need to be happy, or more often than not, it's not even like we learned these ideas and cultivated themselves. The ideas that maybe we've been told we need in order to be happy. Maybe we were told by our parents, by our teachers, by commercials, by movies. I mean, the beauty of these, I love the rom-coms. Don't get me wrong, it's like my favorite movies are often these like romantic comedies. But what we see is like, person meets other person, calamities ensue, we want them to end up together, they end up together, and then the credits roll. And it's the understanding within that narrative is they had an issue, they worked out the issue, and they live happily ever after. And I don't know if you've ever had that, but in any situation I've been in, particularly romantically, that there were short calamities that ensued and misunderstandings that were had and wacky things that occurred and weird best friends that were quirky. But at some point, there was the expectation that the credits would roll and everyone lives happily ever after. But then the version is, well, who does the dishes? Am I always doing the dishes? Are you always doing the dishes? Do you cook more? Do I cook more? And the day-to-day aspect of being in relationship to others, and again, this could be romantic, this could be our family, this could be any number of situations, but when we are in a loving relationship with someone, it's not that the credits roll and we're happily ever after. It's that there's a path that we are actually being presented with where we can offer genuine love. So I'll go through these 4 aspects of genuine love according to the Buddhist tradition, then I'll come back to the sense of being in relationship to others. Because a lot of what I'm going to talk about transcends romantic relationships. Even though I started there, I think that there's actually ways that we can go in terms of other forms of relationships, so I don't want to limit us to that. The four ways that love is often talked about in Buddhism is known as the four Brahma Viharas. I'm going to try and, well, there might be a few Sanskrit phrases here, I apologize. I'll limit myself to 5 total. The first of these is Brahma Vihara. So Brahma might mean godly or divine, sometimes translated sublime. Vihara would be abode. Oddly enough, the 4 sublime abodes, and sometimes it's translated as attitudes, that's fine too. It's not, we don't really have an exact translation. Often what it's called is the 4 measurables, 4 measurable ways of offering love. Some would say the 4 sublime qualities. It's not bad. In either case, the fact that these qualities transcend, they're almost like transcendent, are normal worldly expectations of how love can be. That's the idea of these 4 divine abodes, ways of abiding. So we could abide in metta or maitri. This is translated as loving kindness. Sometimes I often hear people these days say love and kindness. It's actually loving with ing, kindness. Sometimes it's translated as kind friendliness. The second would be karuna, which can be translated as compassion. So compassion is an interesting one. That we actually obviously should have in loving, like romantic relationships and family relationships, etc. But it's a lot of these things transcend even just the people we know. We can have compassion for people we don't know, people we even struggle with. We know very well and find them difficult. It's a sense of, there's a lot of wideness to all of these qualities. The third of these is mudita, sympathetic joy. And the fourth is upeksha, sometimes translated as equanimity, or Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master, will often translate it as inclusiveness, and I like that as well. So let me go through all of these, because you might just be like, okay, that was a lot of foreign words, a lot of Sanskrit terms, and they don't really mean anything to me. But the idea here is that we have this open, unconditional heart. We talked about this last time, so this doesn't count as another Sanskrit word because I've already talked about bodhicitta, the open or awake heart mind. And we talked about this in the video around these transcendental actions like generosity, patience, and discipline, and so on, that we can sort of manifest once we open our heart to the world around us. Similarly, in terms of ways of being, now, I think the transcendental actions are more like ways of doing things, or ways of being as well. Here, we've got this list of 4. These 4 ways of manifesting and abiding in love. And they arise out of our own inherently open, tender, awake heart. You might notice that you've already experienced all of these. It's not like these are things that you need to go out and now you're like leveling up and learning something new even. It's just we're acknowledging something that's already been present and cultivating more of it. That's the idea of turning our attention to these 4 Brahma Viharas, or 4 measurable ways of offering love. So the first is that of maitri, loving kindness. So kind friendliness, however we'd like to translate it. And we have a formal loving kindness practice that's been developed over the centuries. This is not something Lodro Rinzler made up by any stretch of the imagination. The Buddha taught extensively about ways of offering loving kindness. And this was formalized into a practice that's been around for so long. And you can actually find it in our guided meditations folder on our website. It's very clearly marked as loving kindness. There's also an introduction to loving kindness if you want a little bit more detail around where this comes from. But the practice itself is that we would bring to mind ourself. We always have to include ourself in the ways that we offer love. As RuPaul famously says, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love anybody else? So once we have some feeling of self-love in the practice, we can actually then offer love to the people that we know in our life, that we really care for, that we feel a lot of tenderness toward, maybe that are suffering, and offer a sense of loving kindness to them, a sense of kind friendliness through aspirations for their well-being. And then we get into really tricky territory where we think about people that we don't know very well. It could be the people who pick up the trash, or who we see at the local coffee shop, or people that are our neighbors or coworkers that we may not necessarily know much about their life, but we bring them to mind and recognize their humanity. And then even the difficult people, the difficult politician, the difficult coworker, the difficult ex, we bring them to mind and recognize that they too possess the same basic goodness, wholeness, completeness that we do, that our loved ones do, even the strangers do. We make the aspiration that they too might be happy, that they might be healthy, they might feel safe. If they did, wouldn't they probably act differently, and their confusion might cease and they might actually be helpful to people instead of harmful? Wouldn't that be something? So there's a lot within this very simple practice of loving kindness. And once we've actually we're done with dividing the world into I like you, I don't like you, I normally don't even think about you, we start to actually offer a sense of loving kindness to all beings, everyone. Because really, those are sort of the three buckets that we divide the world into. So similar to our friend who said, I've got this long list of expectations of what I need in order to be in love. Here we're saying, well, let me look at the way I offer love. I offer it very fluidly to the people that I like. Pretty good about that. I'm a very loyal friend. I'm a very loyal, partner, whatever it might be. I don't often consider people that I don't know very well. Maybe I see them in the news, my heart breaks for them a little. Okay, maybe that's somewhere that we can go further. And often I just end up villainizing the people that I think are bad or difficult. And I don't want to actually even offer my heart to them. I don't want them to be happy. And then we can look at that and see, that's where I'm drawing the lines around my own open heart. But if I want to progress and live an open-hearted life, I actually have to look at these various ways I divide the world up into I like you, I dislike you, I don't know you. And see if we can sort of gradually build kind friendliness, loving kindness for all beings. So that we're not limiting ourselves with our expectations of, I can only offer love to my family, my friends. I can only offer love to these sorts of people, but not those sorts of people. Those sorts of people who believe that sort of thing, I can't have any open-heartedness toward. We start to look at where we limit our love with our expectations and our ideas of other people. So it's a beautiful practice for that reason. And if you have been doing some of the basic mindfulness practice for a lot of time here, my advice to you would be to bring in more loving kindness at this stage. In this Genuine Being series, it's a good time to engage loving kindness even more. So maybe that means if you practice 7 days a week, good for you. You would do loving kindness twice or 3 times, and mindfulness the rest. If you practice 5 days a week, maybe you do loving kindness once to twice in a week, and you do mindfulness the rest of the time. But to bring this practice in is really helpful in expanding our heart, sort of growing the heart muscles to be more inclusive, which we'll come back to in a second term. So this is the first of the 4, which is that of loving kindness. The second is karuna. So karuna is compassion. Compassion is not the idea that I'm up here, a really highly evolved spiritual person, you're down here, and I pity you. There's real sense of the more we become familiar with our own ways of pain and suffering, the ways that we get stuck in anger and jealousy and pride and the rest of it, the more we start to notice that in other people. We say, oh my gosh, look how this person's acting. They're really causing a mess for themselves and others. And we start to have compassion for their confusion, compassion that they are causing themselves and others harm. We say if they weren't so confused, they probably wouldn't be doing this. So similar to what I was talking about with the difficult people. We can actually start to have compassion for the ways that people suffer. And again, there's people in our life who we love. And maybe we have an aging relative who's having a very hard time, and we have great compassion for them. We know, for example, it's not compassion like, I pity you, but like, you feel claustrophobic because you've been in quarantine for so long, for example. I know what it's like to feel claustrophobic. I've been there. I've felt that before. So there's some sense of, I understand where you might be coming from. Maybe the stories look different. Maybe the life experience is a little different, but some sense of underneath there's some emotional content that you're working with, and I actually can relate to that. And my heart breaks for you because I understand what it's like. So Thich Nhat Hanh also famously said in many different ways, in many different books, understanding is the other name for love. That if we can't understand someone, we can't love. And so this idea of compassion is seeking to understand. Where's the points of connection and understanding with, I use the example of people we love, people we don't know. We see such horrible things in the news these days. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe our heart breaks, but we don't know these people. But we say, oh, they're being separated from their families. I know what it's like when I can't see my family for a long period of time. It's different. It's a different situation, perhaps. But that feeling of loneliness, the feeling of fear, we know those feelings, either in that situation or something similar. And that's where we say, oh, there's the access point for compassion. Compassion to suffer with these people, to be there, to be open to the suffering of others. Oh, I can be open to it. That's all I'm asking. I can seek to understand where you might be coming from. And of course, this is very hard with those difficult people. Very, very easy for us to say that person did something wrong and they're bad. It negates their basic goodness. It negates the fact they have the same seeds for awakening that we do. To write them off and put them away. Either in our own heart or in society or in jail. We say, no, we can't deal with you. You don't get our compassion. Can we seek to understand these people? If someone does something that we find monstrous, how can we seek to understand them? It's very interesting, I've been thinking a lot since his passing that John Lewis, Representative John Lewis, spoke openly on this wonderful podcast with Krista Tippett called On Being. And she was interviewing him about his work in civil rights activism at a very crucial time in our nation's history, and how people were beaten, how people were abused and spit on. He would say, even when someone is calling you names and spitting on you, you're down on the ground. The training that we received is we would look up at them and we would say, how did you get to be this way? Did someone teach you to think like this? Have you always thought like this? What were you like when you were a young baby, you were a child? Did you hate so much then? And when we sort of look at it, it's heartbreaking to hear him talk about it. I'm butchering it, I apologize, but to hear him talk about it, it's like in the moment where we're literally faced with abuse, to say, I'm not going to harden my heart. I'm not going to accept what you're doing. That's not what we're saying at all, to be clear. We're not saying this is a good thing, I'm accepting it, I'm all on board. It's like, I'm not going to harden my heart. I'm going to actually reflect and seek to understand. When you were a child, did you hate? I don't remember hating as a child. What access points do we have for compassion for these people that we may have a very difficult time with? Where do we find those points of understanding so that we can begin to open our hearts to them? It's very difficult what I'm asking of you, I apologize. But this is the work that we do in terms of living from a place of love. That understanding is the other name of love. So how can we understand the suffering of others? How can we understand the confusion of others and their pain? The third of these four is that of mudita, or sympathetic joy. Sometimes empathetic joy is the translation. Either is fine. I have a friend who actually translates altruistic joy, if you prefer that. But the idea here is that if compassion is, when someone is suffering, that we have the love and open-heartedness to suffer with them, to be open to their suffering. Sympathetic joy is when we see the happiness and joy of others. We keep our heart open, we rejoice in their joy. I always think about weddings during this particular set of teachings because, it's such a wonderful time that it's like, okay, let's all gather together. We've got these beings who are committing to love and to understanding one another and to just have a bunch of people show up and just rejoice in that. That's the point of being a wedding guest. Why am I there? I'm here to rejoice in their joy. That's the idea. Maybe you felt that when you come to it. Maybe, of course, one of the enemies of sympathetic joy is that of comparing mind. Like, if we show up to the wedding and we're going stag and we say, oh my gosh, I'll never find love like they have. We fall into a poverty mentality. They have what I want. It's very easy to do that. So it's interesting to, as a practice, notice when we fall into comparing mind. That person, has a nicer home than me. That person has a better job than me. That person has more Instagram followers than me. They get to do the thing I want to do. That when we notice that, can we drop that and actually use these moments where we might even feel provoked and we start to fall into that poverty mentality and our heart starts to shut down as an opportunity to love? To say, let me see if I can rejoice in your joy. Let me see if I can practice sympathetic joy. Mudita. I'm happy for you that you got that book deal, that promotion, that home, whatever it might be. And to set aside our version, our expectations of, well, I should be doing that. I should be at that stage in my career, whatever it is. To again, let go of the expectations long enough to love. Just offer a sense of love. To rejoice in the joy of others. The joy of people we love and cherish, the people we don't know, the people we have a hard time with. Finally, we move to upeksha. Equanimity, which is often what people really love. People love equanimity. They want that. That sounds good. But when it comes to a sense of love, the way equanimity is often translated, as I mentioned through Thich Nhat Hanh, is inclusiveness, that we can include everyone in our heart. That we start to look at everyone around us as part of our loving practice. I'm not using this term lightly, loving practice. That when, our difficult family member comes to stay with us, that we say, this is my loving practice. They start to, misplace our objects or, carry on and say things that we don't like at dinner, whatever it is. We say, oh, here's my loving practice. I can be inclusive of you in my heart. Does not mean we always have to agree with them. Doesn't mean we always have to stand. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't say anything. None of that. It's, can we remain open-hearted? Can we let go of the tendency, again, that attachment to, well, they should be acting in this way, and all of the stories that we tell ourselves about that person, to just be open and inclusive in our heart of them. And I realize I'm focusing there on difficult people, but of course, as we go about our neighborhood, we probably see, oh, well, there's that neighbor I like, and we wave to them and we feel uplifted and we're inclusive of them in our heart. And that seems easy enough. And then we run into people we don't know, we might even smile and nod. That can actually uplift their day. So it's a sense of making our heart open and inclusive of whoever we encounter. Even a walk around the neighborhood could become a loving practice. If we let go of, again, our expectations, our attachments, well, I like these people, I don't like these people, I don't know these people, and just be open. I realize not many people are flying these days, but one way that I often think about this is like when you're flying in on an airplane, and at first, as you're about to land in your home city, everyone just looks like ants, right? Everyone's just these tiny little cars going around and things like that. And as we get closer and closer and closer to the ground, they become sort of real. And we say, oh, I don't know if I like that person or whatever it is. But could we have that sort of bird's eye view, which is saying, I'm just going to be inclusive of everyone, all these beings in my heart. So much of our work here in Genuine Being is not adding new things to do, although obviously we did offer a couple practices before, but they're not even necessarily things that to do, because all of this stuff around opening to our own heart, mind, to the paramitas/transcendental actions, to these practices of being in nature and being in company of people who echo back our genuine being and our basic goodness, to these 4 ways of offering love. These are ways of being. These are ways of just being open-hearted, being in communication and connection with the world around us. Being fully who we are, no matter who's in front of us. And the thing that if we are going to do, the thing that we do is we just let go. We keep letting go. We let go of our expectations. We let go of the list of here's what I need to be happy in a romantic relationship. Here's what I need this person to say or do in order for me to feel that I can have them as my house guest or whatever it is. It's like we start to open our heart wider and wider. When we do that, we actually find the skillful ways to relate to the difficult people. We find the skillful ways to actually find people that we connect to and fall in love with. But there is a bit of an emptying out process of all of the tens of thousands of ideas we have about every goddamn scenario, so that we can be open to things as they are. So what if we actually lived our life in this way? For people who are dating, that we would actually go into a date and not have the idea of like, here's what I need you to do or say, but to be open to who they are, and to explore, to involve a sense of curiosity. What would it be like to show up at that family member's door who we're having a very hard time with, and we have a lot of stories about the way they are and what they do? To let those go, to empty out for a moment, long enough to just be inclusive in our heart. How could we do this for our neighbors, for our coworkers, for our friends, so that we show up not from a place of our stories and our expectations, but from a place of genuine love, free of attachment to outcome, free of attachment to what we think ought to happen, what used to happen, to just be present long enough to what is happening right now. I'm asking a lot of you, but I also am very much looking forward to how these teachings land, and hearing more about how you might be able to integrate these 4 ways of genuine